great pleasure to be here with Tony Pepper, who I first met in 2012, and it was actually quite a long courtship. We didn't, in fact, end up investing until 2014. But I think when we first met, you had, what, 12 employees?
Yeah.
You were in this tiny office next to a cemetery in Queen's Park. It was pretty sort of basic back then. And you look at, I mean, incredible progress since then. So now you've got, I think you're now the second or third largest investment in our VCTs, due to do almost £40 million of recurring revenue by the end of this year. 84% gross margins, still growing fast. You've got 2,500 customers, winning in government, financial services, healthcare, with names like, you know, the NHS and the Ministry of Justice, two largest email systems in the UK, most of the Magic Circle law firms. And then, I mean, most importantly, defining a new category for cloud email security. You know, these are markets where you had like the likes of, obviously in the very early days, Microsoft, but then, you know, more recently, Proofpoint, Mimecast, you know, other sort of NASDAQ listed, typically West Coast type funds. And then here is a British software company competing and winning and getting Gartner to trumpet your success. So we're all very excited to hear the background to the success. Did you always want to be an entrepreneur?
I think the short answer to that is no. I think, you know, I meet a ton of entrepreneurs that have sort of almost born an entrepreneur. You can sort of see the patterns kind of evolve. But that was definitely not me. I just love working in great businesses with a great culture where you can feel part of a team. And I never ever thought that I would ever start a business. I never dreamt of starting a business. And I suppose I sort of reluctantly set up this business after we'd sold our previous company. And I just didn't really feel like the culture in that business, which had acquired our company, was a place that I could sort of thrive anymore, really. So it sort of led on from there, really.
And then what was the actual then motivation, that, like, just to get Egress actually sort of off the ground?
I was a younger man back then, very naive. If I could meet that person now, I would probably try and convince him not to do it, weirdly enough. But actually, I just think there's a desire to kind of want to build stuff and make a difference. And if you're not in that environment, then it becomes quite stifling, really.
Yeah.
So I think it's great to have a sort of anchor idea. But I'm yet to meet a tech business that over time doesn't sort of change and evolve that idea. So I think sometimes you can maybe overcomplicate things. I think, weirdly enough, I think that naivety probably was a strength, really, because actually we felt we had an interesting idea. It felt pretty niche. We knew we could back ourselves. You know, we knew we worked hard. We knew we could, if we come up with some problems, we could figure it out. And it was really as simple as that. It's only with benefit of hindsight, really, do you look back and say, crikey, you really didn't think that through. But in reality, these are some of the core building blocks you need to actually get through some of those tough times.
But the thing is, I actually remember the first time we spoke, and I just really sensed a fire in your belly, because, like, at your previous business, like, the owner basically had sort of fallen asleep at the wheel. Revenues were going down. I think he moved out to Kenya and was living on a beach. Business going down, and then you and Neil, the co-founder, basically turned it around, launched a new product, got it out there, grew the sales, ended up being a huge success, and you made a huge amount of money for someone else who did nothing.
Right. Do you know,
and that did not make you happy.
That was the best thing that ever happened to me, actually, to be honest, because I think I've only ever worked for two companies. Yeah. That company, which we then sold in 2006, and then this company. Yeah. So the resume doesn't look very interesting from a company experience perspective. But it was the best thing that ever happened, because I was sort of 22 at the time. Yeah. Moving down to London from Liverpool, the bright lights of London was really interesting for me. And the fact that the founder of that company, it was truly a lifestyle business. And I mean lifestyle in the sense of he was never there. We were allowed, totally irresponsibly, might I add, to just try things, you know, to experiment. And it was almost experimenting with a company that was already established, already had customers, but it needed to pivot. So we just learned so much in those years. At a very, very young age, we held quite a lot of responsibility. And it was after about 5 years where we turned that business around. We then sold that business to a Swedish company called PointSec Mobile Technologies. And then 3 months after that acquisition, we were immediately then sold again to Checkpoint. So I see that as a really important part of just lessons learned. You know, there's some things we did quite well. I think most of the things we didn't do very well. And I think we look back on that, and I think if you've made some mistakes, and you can learn from those, I think that still some of those we certainly took into this business.
And then I'd love to understand a bit more about your journey then from that sort of founding stage through to, I guess where it is now. I mean, something as investors we're sort of really focused on is, like the skills that are needed as an entrepreneur, like just create something from nothing, which is so hard and so many people don't get it right. But where we meet them, the companies are often like growing very fast, but still 10 or 15 employees. And it's a very sort of entrepreneurial hustle required to get off the ground. But we want to back companies that then become global champions. And so that entrepreneur then becomes the CEO of a multinational, multi-product, say, competing with the big boys. And then, what did you think going in, as I guess you were saying, you sort of were feeling naive from our side because you had all the talents and skills. But like, what do you think that you've learned along that way, I guess almost 10 years now?
Wow. Yeah, I think we've been in business 15 years now. So it's sort of we're in our trimester, if you like. We are pockets of the business. First 5 years was a life experience, and then the next 5 raising our first round of investment through you guys, Ed, and then up to our Series C, and then sort of evolving. So I kind of feel like the business reinvents itself every 2 or 3 years to some extent.
Yeah.
I think as the chief exec, you sort of have to reinvent yourself with it, really, and have to be very open to change. In fact, I was actually talking to one of your team earlier about it. I think that is the one thing that is inevitable in our business. It's just constant change. But I think you've got to be open to that change. You've got to open your heart to that change. And it can be quite a soul-searching experience sometimes, really, where you really have to understand, what aren't you good at? What could you get better at? So I think it's important around trying to surround yourself with people that can really bring a value to not just the business development, but your own personal development, really. So it's just a constant journey, really. And the sort of problems, they're not that different, really, from when we were super early, but they're just on a bigger scale now. That's all. When you've got 10 people, you can sort of wrap your arms around those 10 people, and just through sheer will and motivation, you can sort of almost hypnotize people in going on a journey. So to some extent, it's a little bit easier there. Where it gets much, much harder is as you start to bring in new people and scale. It's much harder to kind of have that camaraderie, that battlefield mentality where you can wrap your arms around, especially in remote offices. And I always remember thinking that I was sort of naturally assumed that you'd get to problems of scale when you were at 200, 300, 400 people. That's not the case. It's amazing how you start tripping up over problems where you think, how is this even happening in this business? When you're 100 people, it hits you really early, actually, that those sort of problems of being able to scale the culture of a business and the communication of a business, making sure everyone's on the bus. So it becomes a challenge quite quickly, actually. And
always, you mentioned culture. You've always been very focused on keep preserving the culture as you've sort of grown the business. And that presumably is something that becomes really hard at scale.
Yeah, really hard. And you realize that the primary role you carry, actually, when you get to a certain size, you stop being the guy doing all the big deals or the guy answering the phones, answering any technical questions. And you really become the culture carrier, I guess. Yeah. Making sure everyone, understands the mission, is motivated by that, understand what their part in that mission is, but just keeping everyone really motivated. And more importantly, making sure that from a talent acquisition perspective, you never lose sight at any point on that part of the process. I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes we made really early on. We kind of thought when we were at sort of 50, 60, maybe 80 people, we brought in a really experienced, chief people officer, and thought maybe it's someone else's responsibility now to kind of bring in those people and we'll kind of do all the stuff. And every chief exec that I talked to in those early stage, that's the last thing you can ever do. And it feels like, well, you've got to be sort of on the business, not in the business. And that's just garbage. You have to be right. We're at 320 people now and we're still doing all final interviews.
maybe just talk about Egress, the business, a bit more now. So again, going back to the beginning, like maybe it's interesting to talk through. Like, did you have a special insight? Like, did you kind of go, right, there's this business for cloud email security, and we can see it, right on day one, or was it like a bit of luck, or like?
A lot of luck, a lot of hard work, but actually, sort of on reflection, when we sort of look back at what we were taking to market in 2010, if you like, our core platform relied on customers being able to connect to the internet to be able to deliver policy controls. And I'm sure everyone in the audience thinking, that's really not a big deal.
Of course, because the iPhone only came out in 2007. It was barely ubiquitous in the consumer setting in 2009.
People weren't really, the phones were still used as phones as opposed to really an extension of your office, really. Actually, the infrastructure around connectivity and bandwidth was still sort of developing, really. But our premise was really relied on a cloud-first model. From an email security perspective, most, if not all, businesses were still on-premise. So they had server rooms with flashing lights in, and they had all of their kit on-premise, big server rooms with. Whereas actually, we came to market with it's a hosted cloud infrastructure. Before, as utterly ridiculous as this sounds, before cloud was a word people used in their vernacular. It's a hosted service as opposed to a cloud service. Yeah. It's amazing how fast the world has evolved really since 2010, the last 12 years. Now, the very idea of delivering services that aren't cloud first as part of a software as a service model, as part of a SaaS model, is absurd really. But in 2010, it really wasn't like that. Really.
Well, actually, I remember when we were investing in 2014, it was still a question then. Like, we could see it in the numbers, and you were growing so fast already. And we're like, is this really going to be at scale? Are people really just going to be connected to the internet all the time?
I still think we think about those now. I think a big break can just be, often a big break can be as small at the time as a key customer in a key vertical. They shouldn't really have the right to back you as a product. They know you're early stage. In that classic adoption curve, they really are the early adopters. And it's getting someone to really buy into what you're doing and buy into that dream, even though they know it's going to be a little bit buggy, it's not going to be quite right. You're really going on a journey together. And even today, we still go through it now. When we're trying to break into a new vertical, even to this day, there are still key customers in that particular vertical who will be the first at that level of scale to really buy into kind of what you deliver. So we've had that a lot along the way, really. And then once you've won that client, maybe you make a couple of mistakes along the way and they're willing to work with you. Then it's about really focusing on looking for lookalike opportunities and then focusing on that particular vertical, but rather than just sort of trying to provide the tech to any type of organization in any type of vertical, in any type of geography. We've really been very good at focusing in one area, one geo, one vertical, trying to dominate that vertical and then segue into complementary adjacent verticals. So I think the breaks are on the way as really customers giving us that opportunity and then us taking that opportunity. We're just about to go through an exercise of over-rewarding and over-celebrating tenure in our business now. There's a lot of people in our business that have been here 15 years, 12 years, 10 years, which in a tech company is really unusual. Yeah. Because especially with the younger generation where you tend to be bouncing from one company to the next on your journey to setting up your first business, right? That's kind of the mode now, right? We've got lots of people that have been here a long time and we really want to celebrate that. And I think there's no question that we wouldn't have got through some of those early challenges through each level of scale when you're going from up to 1 million to up to 10 to up to 20 to approaching 40. The people are everything. And there are individuals that have, put Herculean levels of effort in to kind of get you on the journey. I really think that sometimes you can overthink things really, and maybe actually sometimes think too far ahead. Whereas actually I think it's really important to stay in the moment. Maybe be a little bit more short term, not so much in your strategic thinking, but how you execute. And it really is all about the right kind of people, the people with real hustle, really. And I think that's the challenge. One of the things I talk about a lot, again, with a lot of tech companies that are scaling is sometimes they'll build a team because they feel the playbook is, I'm going to hire this chief product officer, I'm going to hire this chief people officer. They've just come from a company with 1,000 employees and they've been through on the journey, and yet we're at 10 employees. It's like, that's the wrong hire for that moment.
Yeah.
I think too often you'll bring in someone with bags of experience at the wrong stage in the business. I think sometimes you've got to, on reflection now, having been doing it a while, the people you bring in have got to be relevant for that stage of growth.
Yeah.
And I think too often, and I think investors often guide people in the wrong direction, too often you're bringing in people with the wrong type of skill sets for that moment in time. So you never get to that scale. So I think it's horses for courses, really.
And then what about on the product side? Like the product has evolved tremendously. You know, it was just, you know, encryption. It's now does so much. And you've had, you know, Microsoft suddenly offering encryption for free within Office 365, and, you know, competitors doing all sorts of things. Suddenly big West Coast funded, you know, new players that didn't exist 2 years prior, suddenly on the doorsteps. And yet, you know, here we are today, arguably winning the segment. Like, how on earth have you managed to like keep on top of what's going on in the market and keep ahead?
I think whatever idea you believe you're taking to market is really early stage business, it will not be that idea in 10 years time. Yeah, it probably won't be that idea in 5 years time. And I think you've got to be super open to, you'll start with something, and that something needs to be interesting, but you have to be open to evolving that value proposition. And the only way you can do that is to stay super close to your customers and just understand them, you know, what are the things that really matter? Because in the world of cybersecurity, which is where we live now, it's all about outcomes. And if you're not delivering tangible value, and there's millions of cybersecurity companies, then I think you can dry up pretty quick. So it is a constant, exhausting journey of evolution, quite frankly. And oddly enough, where we started as email encryption, that is a very, very small part of what we do now. Yeah. And it's had to be like that because we have to remain relevant. And what was relevant 10 or 11 years ago is nowhere near as relevant now. So we've had to reinvent our business. It seems like we have to reinvent our business every 3 or 4 years, quite frankly. And that needs support. Not just support from people that often have to reinvent themselves along with it. It's just something else to learn. It's something else to kind of expose yourself to. But your investors and your partners, they need to go with you on that journey too. And you personally, Ed, have been a massive support for us and Albion as a business to help us and encourage us and go with us on that journey when you're reinventing yourself. Because it is, you're making big bets, what seems like all the time. And that's key to, and you won't always get them right, but I think it's key to just be on that. And
probably helpful in the world of cyber that actually the UK is quite a good hub for innovation within tech. Obviously the acquisition came out of the GCHQ Accelerator, and that's been big.
Well, for us, that was a big moment, right? So we acquired our first company about 2 years ago. And again, we acquired it because it would allow us to enter new markets. And at the time, and still today, you know, one of the biggest threats around email is something we'll probably all experience, is people just getting attacked with emails that are sent as an impersonation email to make people think, oh, this is from Ed, but he's asking me some unusual things, and he's asking me to transfer funds, not in this usual account, but in this other one. And these are the type of threats now that we all see, you know, even as consumers, that we have to worry about. They are now the advanced threats that we need to protect our customers from. So, and rather than build it yourself, I think sometimes there's some amazing, amazing tech startups that just don't have, they're too niche, and they don't have the kind of collective firepower in that business to be able to, for that product to realize its potential, really. So, yeah, 2 years ago, that was another big moment for us to make our first acquisition. And I think it'll probably go down in our history as probably one of the smartest things we've ever done, I think.
What have been the key challenges along the way? I mean, any moments you're like, oh my God, this is never going to work?
That happens a lot.
I know.
Yeah. You've really got to zoom out in my world to see a nice upward trend, really. But in the moment, on a weekly basis and a monthly basis, it's just a highs and lows, right? But it comes down to people. It sounds simple, but ultimately, a tech business is its foundational roots of success is finding the right people that have got the right talent and then wrapping the right kind of environment around them to realize that talent. and you as leaders being open to allowing them to realize their potential, because the best talent don't like to be stifled. They like to, you know, and often it can be of any age group. You have to take age and throw it away. You know, you can't think that because this person's maybe later in the career, they can't have the same value as someone that's 23, coming straight out of university. You got to look at everyone very equally. So I think talent acquisition and talent retention is absolutely critical. And that's the biggest challenge, because in technology, and in particular COVID brought so many challenges beyond the obvious ones you'd imagine, because it just opened up the talent warfare. And now some of our guys based out of Sheffield or Cheltenham, where usually they would be within that employment atmosphere of those around them. Now they were getting hired by West Coast tech companies that didn't care if they worked remote all the time. So, and yet while it opened our talent pool up to a wider audience, you were also, you sort of were under threat where you weren't expecting from. So I think attracting talent has become our number one objective. And that's things like Glassdoor. That's things like LinkedIn. That's all of the outward-facing things that you publish to the world. That's great places to work. You've got to put a lot of time in. Actually, our talent acquisition team and our people performance team, their customers are employees, making sure that they're happy, making sure that they love the work-life balance and well-being, and huge amounts of time and effort and energy and cost actually on making the business the most amazing place to work. Because in this day and age, you can't just go and get a job with somebody else.
How have you found your ability to transfer that culture to the US, where, I mean, now, you know, it's really beginning to, after a little while getting it right, it's really beginning to work, I think. Have you found you've had to adapt?
Yeah, we spent years getting the US right. And the founders couldn't move to the US for various reasons, kids, all kind of stuff. And it just took us a lot longer to get it right. And that's because we couldn't get the right leadership. Ultimately, it is all about the right level of leadership. And actually what we realized is we were trying to kind of sort of find the magic bullet, find someone that would be that person. And actually, that wasn't the right thing to do either. In the end, oddly enough, we spend as much time and energy when we build, we're a talent builder in our business. We take really early career people and we grow them. So actually, we're shipping as many people that we've built out to the United States than we built locally now, and then build around them. So actually, that's really become the success of our business. You know, if last quarter alone, we sent another 3 people. Can you imagine how amazing that would be if you're 24, 25 years of age, if you have the opportunity to relocate and go and live in New York? It'd be amazing, right? So I think, and that culture carrying experience, who might have 2 or 3 years experience in our business, just helps galvanize a lot of those local hires. So it's only through just getting it wrong time after time and reinventing and trying new things have we now finally just exploded in the United States after a lot of them.
Having done all this hard work and really sort of taking off, like where do you want to go? Is there an end game in mind? How do you see your journey from here onwards?
My wife asked me that question a lot. a lot. Because we keep reinventing ourselves, I love what we do. But I never ever thought we'd still be on this journey in 15 years down the line. You know, naively again, I thought we'd start the business up in 2000 and whenever it was, I had 8. 5 years down the line, we'll have an exit and it'll be a great event. That's just completely naive. Why didn't you tell me that years ago? You kept that from me. Look, as long as we're still having fun, that'd be great. As long as we're still growing, but personally, I'm developing and evolving as well as the business. Then that's really exciting. Ultimately, I'm certain if we're lucky and we position ourselves well, there may well be an outcome at some point for the business. But I think if you fixate on the outcome, it never happens. I know you've often told me through your mentorship, Ed, and we talk a lot, you know, businesses are actually, they're not sold, they're bought, right? So I think we've got to position ourselves at a point where should something come along that's just really too exciting to turn down, I want to be in a point where we're just bitterly disappointed to have to accept that, really, because we're so excited that we just feel like there's so much more runway to go after. So I guess optionality is what we're looking for, and who knows.
I think the relationship between an investor and a founder is a very interesting, complex one, because on the one hand, there's a bit of our job, which is at a more formal end, maybe a bit more traditional, is to hold people to account. Like you said, you were going to do this, and you haven't, and like we understand things change and no journey is straightforward, but like why not? But on the other hand, you sort of want to have the relationship where you're meeting in a board meeting and kind of like, we know life's really like crap. Let's just quickly, just what happened there, but like, let's now talk about the issues of the day. And like, how can we help? Let's brainstorm. Is there anyone in our network that can, can help with the issue? We spent, from our side, a huge amount of time up front, making sure the people we work with are the people we want to be working with for 10 years plus.
When I first came to Ed in 2012, I was very different, and Ed loves to remind me the silly things that I came up with at the time, in particular around the deal structure, about why I felt it was right or wrong. Equally, I remind you of the silly things that you came up with back in 2012. So Ed and I have both really individually and personally kind of grown up and evolved together. I consider him a very, very, very close friend. And that's almost impossible to have when it's a board director that has fiduciary responsibility. But Ed and I are very different personality types, but we both have this just this sort of quest for knowledge and personal development and professional development. We're constantly challenging each other. There's not a week that goes by that Ed doesn't either recommend a new book or a book will appear on my desk. I don't even question it when it does. This gift from Ed rocks up. And I just know. I don't even question whether to read it. I know that will be really interesting. So I'm the biggest cheerleader for Ed as an individual, but also Albion as a business. I think they really, because of that Evergreen Fund, I think they really do believe and buy into long-term relationships. It allows you to kind of go on a journey. And as much as the team and the tech and the management team are a big, big part of what's allowed us to be successful, there is absolutely no doubt that I would put Ed alongside them as equally as important to us. And he's going to hate me saying that because that's the way he is. But it has just been an absolute pleasure.
I think it helps also that we're on the same side. Like we want to go and win. Like it's like small company just setting off, and there's this great big market to go at, and like we're both just trying to like, how do we go and win? Yeah. So far, so good. But I mean, the odd bump along the way, but nothing material. Just more like frank conversations, no falling out.